Good morning, Joe
Good
Weinbanks.
morning. How are you?
Well,
I
I spent Easter waiting for like Christmas morning, which is, I mean, talking to you.
Well, Christmas morning is almost there.
Thank
I
you.
think the more we go through the report, the more it is Christmas morning.
Yeah, boy, I'll say. I mean, I am almost through it, but it is. I mean, it really is extraordinary because you almost have to reread stuff that you just read, right, and go, wait, what? I mean, it is a devastating case, isn't it?
It really, really is. And for the Attorney General to have said what he said in the press conference, knowing that in just a few hours we would all see that he was lying, is just extraordinary to me. It's one thing to lie when you think you can get away with it.
Yeah.
But he knew that everything that was in there, and there's a lot that isn't redacted. We should not be focusing on the redactions, although Congress should get the full report without redactions. We, the people, have seen enough.
Yeah. You actually tweeted that. You said this is worse than Watergate when the AG approved the DNC break-in in his office and went to jail for his role in the cover-up. Barr is lying to the public and is guilty of a cover-up. You say, I hope the public doesn't let it succeed. And you retweeted Adam Schiff as well, who said in every way this is more significant than Watergate. We have so long ago passed the worse than Watergate part, haven't we?
Yes, we have. It's partly because this one involves a real threat from a foreign power, and it puts in danger America and democracy. Democracy was sort of threatened by Nixon because he was using our institutions of justice, the CIA, the FBI, to cover up his own committee's crimes and his own White House's crimes. So, but it was homegrown. It wasn't involving Russia. It was just Americans who were doing this. And so that makes it a little bit scarier to me, is that we have the foreign power involved.
Your friend Lawrence Tribe tweeted, the point of public hearings into whether Trump's conduct warrants impeachment and removal is to both learn all the facts and, equally important, to win public support for a way forward. Such hearings must begin now. I mean, Jill, I've been dying to ask you where you come down on this whole impeachment, whatever we call it, right? What are your thoughts?
I'm completely in agreement with the idea of fact-finding hearings. The way it proceeded in Watergate is such a great process for us to use now. We had the Senate hearings, which led the people to be able to see the witnesses themselves. It wasn't a summary of them. It was seeing John Dean and judging John Dean's credibility based on having seen him.
Yep.
It was seeing Jeb Magruder. It was seeing all of the major witnesses. It was learning at the same time as we learned that there were tape recordings. And it was a way to bring the public to accept what the facts were because they saw them unfolding in front of them. And that's what I think we need now, is the fact-finding, and then you reach a determination of whether there is a viable case, both in terms of the facts, although it seems pretty apparent factually that we have a perfectly valid prosecutable case, either for impeachment or for criminal indictment. We have the facts now, but not everybody has read that report. Not everybody is seeing it. People will see the hearings if they go on in public. Watergate hearings were one of the most publicly viewed episodes in American history, and I believe that these hearings would be equally viewed.
I agree.
And you can't distort them if you see them yourself.
That's right.
I don't want to hear just from Mueller and Barr.
Jill,
they're good weaknesses.
Yeah, I agree. Jill, can you clarify, because it's so important what you're saying, because the people that don't remember Watergate. So what you're saying is there were hearings first that weren't technically impeachment hearings.
No, the first hearings were in the Senate, and it was a special investigation of Watergate.
Okay.
And it was looking at what happened, what are the laws that got violated, what laws do we need to pass that might prevent this. So, for example, a lot of campaign finance reform came out of it because one of the things that caused Watergate was they had way too much money. They had millions of dollars stuffed in safes, unaccounted for money. Nobody had to say where the money came from, who the donors were, what the conflicts of interest were. And unfortunately, Citizens United, a Supreme Court decision, undid the Watergate reform legislation, and we're back to money playing a very unsavory role in our elections again. So that's something that really needs to be reinvented again. We need to get back to campaign finance reform, that's for sure. And I think that there's a lot of other areas where Congress has oversight responsibilities and needs to know what happened and needs to evaluate whether there are laws that could change this and what we need to do. We also need to know, Richard Nixon made famous, I am not a crook, and we needed to know whether he was. And the same thing is true here. We need to know whether Donald Trump is in the thrall of the Russians, whether he is beholden to them, whether his policies are being pursued to benefit them rather than America. And those are things that Congress is really set up to do. And so
in terms of
overboard.
In terms of presidential proclamations, I am not a crook, how does it compare to, this is the end of my presidency, I'm, would you say? I mean, is that not one of the most damning things in the report? What innocent person ever says, oh my God, right, I am effed?
Well, it certainly suggests a guilty mind that, you've been uncovered, you're going to be found. But what we learned from this report, if nothing else, is two things. One, the Trump team are brilliant PR spinners, and two, their spin, which is otherwise known as a cover-up or obstruction of justice, was successful enough that Mueller was stymied in getting the full evidence. And maybe Congress can do that. I don't know. Maybe no one can. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I once was told people don't need to live their lives based on a beyond a reasonable doubt standard. You do in a criminal trial.
Yep.
So for a criminal case, Mueller needed beyond a reasonable doubt proof.
Yep.
You and I can make judgments based on circumstantial evidence and all the evidence that is not circumstantial that we've read in the Mueller report. And we can reach some conclusions. And I would say the conclusion I reach is that the president has done awful things. If they don't reach a beyond a reasonable doubt standard, that doesn't mean that I would vote for him ever. And that has nothing to do with policies that he has. That has to do with his character and whether he is safe for America and for democracy.
Well, you tweeted, stop the spin, by reading the full Mueller report and seeing the facts. There was obstruction of justice and so many contacts with Russia. There had to be conspiracy. There was no exoneration. I feel like it's fairly clear that he was saying, I am not allowed to indict a sitting president, but Congress here is a very strong case for obstruction. And oh, by the way, after he's out of office, I think he should be indicted. I mean, am I reading that wrong?
No, you have it exactly correct. If all Americans would read it carefully, they would. Actually, you don't even have to read it carefully. There are just a few paragraphs there that make absolutely clear that he was saying the only reason that I'm not making a traditional prosecution decision, and that was his word, I'm not making a traditional prosecution decision, is because I'm not allowed to. I cannot indict him. And since I can't indict him, there's no reason for reaching a conclusion on this. The only one who can reach a conclusion is a political judgment for Congress. So he was clearly not intending for Barr to come out and say, I don't think there's an obstruction.
Jill, can I just a couple of follow-ups. I always need more time with you. A couple of follow-ups on impeachment legally, though. Because they've made it obvious they are going to stonewall everything, right? His taxes, his financial records, his White House security clearance guy, obviously all of these subpoenas. So I thought I heard someone say that, obviously the Republicans are trying to force the Democrats into impeachment because they think it's going to be bad politically. I don't think it's going to be bad politically for Democrats personally, but do you need an actual impeachment inquiry to enforce subpoenas or to enforce it more quickly? Can you enlighten us on that?
Yes, I certainly can. And this is one of the most exciting things that I've ever done was Lawrence Tribe and Phil Lacavara, who was one of my colleagues in Watergate, wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post saying that without pending impeachment hearings, you couldn't use the exception to Rule 6 to get the grand jury testimony. And Jerry Golden, a former Supreme Court clerk and a Watergate colleague of mine, and I wrote a counter to that. And since then, Larry Tribe has said he agrees with us. He tweeted that he agreed with Jill Wine-Banks. So I'm really excited that I was able to change his mind. And the mind change was that no, the rule says if it's preliminary to a judicial proceeding, and impeachment is a judicial proceeding, that Congress has the right to get all grand jury testimony.
Because they're saying that was the different. Republicans are saying that's the difference between Clinton and Nixon. That it was a formal impeachment inquiry. That's why everything was provided, unredacted grand jury underlying materials in both of those. This once again is unprecedented. That they're clearly hiding something.
Right.
Right.
Yes. I mean it is different, but the rule says either during or preliminary to a judicial proceeding. And preliminary to is not just hollow words. Preliminary to means before you start official impeachment hearings. And that's why I'm urging that fact-finding hearings start. And they have, in fact, because they've now subpoenaed Don McGahn, the White House counsel, who to me is the equivalent of that he refused to do the bad things he was asked to do.
Yeah.
John Dean did them at first and then realized he was doing something wrong and tried to stop it.
Yeah. I mean, ordering obstruction is still obstruction, and ignorance of the law is not a defense in Don Jr.'s case. It seems to me that he leaned over backwards to give Trump and his team the benefit of the doubt, didn't he?
Yes, he certainly did. There are so many indications that make it ridiculous for them to keep attacking him and the FBI. I mean, if the FBI had wanted to get the president, they would have announced that they were investigating him before the election. And they didn't. They announced about Hillary Clinton and ruined her campaign. They didn't say anything about the ongoing investigation of Trump. So there's absolutely no logic to his argument that they're bad and they're out to get me. And his newest thing, I'm sure you've seen that he has sued
I know.
Cummings
ridiculous
for the subpoena. And it's totally ridiculous. But it's what he does.
Yep.
Barbara Ress was on last night on television saying that's just what he does. He always likes to be the plaintiff, so he goes ahead and he sues.
Not this time. The law is completely on Congress's side here. Quickly, Jill, you also talked about Giuliani saying there's nothing wrong with taking information from Russians. You said this was an incredible, ridiculous comment, as are most of his, but this is especially awful and legally untrue, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it is so blatantly clear that it is illegal to take anything of value from a foreign power.
Thank you.
And that's what taking dirt on Hillary. They were out looking for dirt. We know that that's what campaigns do. You look for opposition research. And if someone comes to you and says, I'm Russian, I'd like to give you opposition research, you have to say no. And remember that this was after the FBI had already warned them, had already said the Russians are out to do something bad here. They may come after you. Please let us know. Did they let them know? No. They didn't report it to the FBI. They just said, oh, good, I love it, especially if it's later in the summer, which is exactly when it got released to do the maximum damage.
My least favorite part of the week is when I have to say we're out of time, Joel Weinberg. So we didn't even get to your tweet about special counsel documents, 14 criminal referrals, only 2 are publicly known. I feel like it's the end of a Batman.
There's so much going on.
Yeah.
We'll do this again.
Yeah. Jill, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. There she goes. Oh, my God. There's never enough time. There's never enough time to talk about